Hey guys, Kid here of Burn 1 with another deck profile. We're continuing our little adventure of underplayed sets that are actually pretty powerful in their own right, that we don't get to see that often, that we don't see them break top 8, and this is one of the ones we've talked about many times before in a lot of other videos of how Accel World is a very strong deck, but unfortunately is like bullied out of the meta because of like things like AOT existing and like the risk factor of playing this deck versus a deck like AOT. So yeah, let me just jump right into it. So here is the meta list that I came up with here. So originally in this list, I think before I've talked a lot about how the level 1 Kuroyuki Hime combo is pretty powerful in its own right, but we ended up landing on the red level 1 game. You'll see why in a second here. But a lot of this stuff is pretty standard. Some of the strengths of Accel World itself is that its deck has a lot of deck manipulation in a really weird and unique way, I guess is the way to put it. Maybe that's the worst, not the correct way to say it. But either way, it has some pretty strong deck manipulation, as well as it has a combo. All its combos at level 1 require no climax to give you really strong hand advantage. So you can stop clocking at level 1 as long as you can start guaranteeing reverses, as well as it can somewhat wall up a little bit against most decks. So let's just jump into the level 0 game here. We actually just play one of the gloomy, countenance? Kirike Hime? I cannot read. So this is a tap 2 brainstorm. Unfortunately, this was before they start putting self-tap brainstorms regularly. So unfortunately, this set, you're stuck with like double tap brainstorms, but luckily our back row is pretty solid in this game, or in this deck. So we played this as a one-of. It's a search brainstorm. We don't necessarily really play it for the search part of the brainstorm. It's more of on play. You can give a character 1500 power. It's just a really cheap power pump with a secondary utility ability if need be, brainstorming to have in your deck, and it helps guarantee your level 1 combo get the reverses you need because as you'll see later on, like I said, our level 1 game plan, we take a lot of risk on playing this level 1 game plan. So if we don't get our reverses off, the deck can fall apart fairly quickly. Next, we play a 3-of Silver Crow. This is our mill runner. So we need a +0, and this deck this level 0 lets us do that. There's not a lot of really strong level 0s to pick from this set, but a +ing level 0 that lets us get multiple attacks off and build stock slowly at 0 is always good. Next, we have this Chiuri. This Chiuri is when it goes to waiting, you can ditch a card from your hand, then top check up to 4 out of avatar or net character to your hand. So this is one of the pieces we're looking at to be able to deck manipulate, because we want to have very fast speed through our first deck, so we can get very solid refreshes, so we can go into our early play level 2 games and stuff like that. And then this helps you find the pieces you need to set up your level 1 game, because our level 1 game requires a back row, 2 specific cards in the back row. Otherwise, the deck can have some trouble after level 1, or sorry, going into level 1 if you don't have that set up. This here is a tech card of choice here. This can actually just, if you don't like this yourself, you can cut it for another Chiuri Mill 4 effect, or like a drop searcher if you feel like a drop searcher will be more important here. I believe there is a yellow drop searcher. There is on attack accelerate drop searcher. That's really good, but because we're focusing more on the red level 1 game plan, we're not playing it in this deck. But yeah, so this is a tech choice here. It's basically pay 1, make your opponent shuffle their waiting room into their deck. So the reason this is in the deck itself is because you can catch your opponent in when they get really unlucky and they like triple trigger climaxes, and you know they have like gold bars in hand and stuff like that. You can force a refresh, giving them a horrible compression. So next turn, they have to spend a ton of resources to either mill their entire deck out again, if they're a set that requires that. You just get to bleed them resources or set up some really advantageous like swings. So like if they triple trigger and they have like a 10 card deck with like 2 climaxes or something in it like that, or like 3 climaxes or something where you're probably not going to shuffle, or you're not going to deal damage through, you can force them to reshuffle their waiting room. Of course, you lose out on the refresh, but it does add a lot of like extra oomph, I guess, towards your attacks, and it can help combo off at the end game as well. So this here is Scarlet Rain. This is our brainstormer of choice actually, because it actually is part of our back row requirement. So this card, if you have the level 1 calming sight Nico and Pado in the back row or on the field, this card gives global 500 to all avatar and net trait characters. And then, like I said, this is our brainstorm of choice. It's a pay 1 tap 2 salvage brainstorm, which is really solid for this deck, especially when we have like a lot of Chiuri and stuff milling our deck for free. Basically, having this back row set up with the 1-0 makes it so our level 1 game is usually always 7k on defense with 2k counters. Means we can fight things like Goblin Slayer and stuff who are going to be like anywhere from 7 to 8k. So we can counter with our 2k counter with 7k, and then it brings it up to 9k, which is really good defensive power. So you can catch a lot of people off guard if they're not used to dealing with the Wally deck of Accel World, because Accel World is so underplayed in the English meta that I feel like almost no one knows what the cards do. Finally, this is another level 0 of choice at being aggressive as well as having great deck manipulation. So when this comes into play, you can mill the top 3 cards of your deck for free. Like I said, we have a lot of ways to accelerate ourselves through the deck, no pun intended, by getting a lot of free mills off of different effects. That way, when you're going through your deck, you don't have to really overexert stock to get through your deck. As well as this is a level 0 reverser, so you can fight most things at level 0. Weakness at this level 1 or level 0 game is that it does struggle with fighting things that are like 3-5 with a level. Unless you get lucky and open up into the Kuroyuki Hime 1500 power pump, you're basically giving up your board, which is kind of rough for the deck. But generally, you want to get to 1 first in this deck versus a lot of matchups if you know you're going to struggle with the level 1 reverses. So yeah, we play 15 zeros. It's kind of like a 1 or 2 zeros short of being like the standard number of zeros decks play, but we have our top end, which does do top check burns. So this is the reason we play a little bit less than normal. Next, we play 3 of the level 1 Kuroyuki Hime, Dress Fluttering in the Wind. So this is kind of like a Slayer, is what the term most people use now, which is on play gains 500 power for every avatar net character you have on the field. So when this play is played last, it's 7k by itself, which is really powerful. And then if you throw a Climax in there, or the like 1k global supports that we're going to have in the back row, it's going to be an 8k on offense, making it really hard for certain decks to fight. So if someone has like a 6k board set up and they have 2k counters, the best they can do is trade with this card, which is really, really strong in its own right. But this is the part where we start getting into why this level 1 game plan is like a high risk, high reward. So obviously, the show being Accel World, we get to play a lot with the accelerate keyword, which is at the start of your climax phase, you can take the top card of your deck and put it into your clock. And if you do so, Kuroyuki Hime itself gains 1000 extra power, and the ability that when the battle opponent of this gets reversed, you can top check up to 4, add an avatar or net trait character to your hand, and then discard the rest. So this is one of the ways we can gain advantage and not have to worry about any like silly climax combos and stuff like that. So it's really hard to whiff your level 1 game in this deck, as long as you get the reverses. It's when you don't get the reverses, it starts getting kind of awkward. We don't play this as 4 of because, like I said, this is more of like a quote-unquote Slayer. We fight big things on the board we want to avoid, and only in situations where we're looking to mill our deck more or quicker is when we want to use it. Like I said earlier, our biggest game plan here is the red level 1 game. Of course, we have 2k counters in the set because our level 1 game is actually pretty big, and then we have our early plays that we hopefully can protect with these free counters, basically. Also gives us a little bit extra splash into yellow for a yellow level 3 game. We play a 4 of the 1-0 Nico and Pado. So it's a global 500, and then whenever you use the accelerate ability, you can choose up to 1 character and give it the effect that when this card's battle opponent becomes reversed, you can pay 1 to salvage 1. So this essentially changes your entire level 1 game into a climaxless combo of pay 1, clock yourself, salvage 2. That is in its own right really, really strong. Since we're always dealing with our waiting room and stuff, it's really easy to cycle 2k counters back into your hand, things like that, set up your hand and get a 2k counter for the next turn and stuff like that. It just a really powerful combination. But as always, we're dealing with a high risk, high reward aspect of having the accelerate keyword being our main game plan of the deck. So it's really tough. It's really important too that we get this. This is why we play it as a 4 instead of anything lower, because if we don't get this card into our hand at level 1, it makes our level 1, like, we're taking that extra risk using accelerate and having to get a reverse and not getting as big of a payoff for it. Because if we're gonna use accelerate, we should get as much power off of it as we can, or sorry, advantage as we can off of it. So doing a pay 1 to let us basically salvage 2 every turn is like really, really strong. Yeah, and it's part of our back row. So if we have the brainstorm plus this out, basically you have 2 global 500s in the back row, which makes your board really, really massive. Finally, this is our main contender at level 1. At first, like I said before, I really like Kurayuki Hime level 1, but I think if we're fighting against what's out there in English, at least this can put up a fighting chance against our bad matchup of Attack on Titan and other Wally type of decks, basically. So this Nico is, if you have a card named Calming Sight Nico Amparo, which is level 1, this is why it's so important, level 1 support that is, so important that we get that as soon as possible so we can play it in the background level 1. This card gains 500 for each of your other Avatar Net characters. So with those 2 on the board, the card with a full board with that support in the back row is 6-5 power with just that 1 support. But if we have the brainstorm as well, it's 7k power like cross turn, which is really, really strong. So now we have a 7k wall with a 2k counter in hand that we can easily loop over and over again through the accelerate keyword, as well as using the Nico and Pato support, which makes it really scary. Like I said, though, it is a crazy high risk, high reward game plan. And of course, we have 2 other effects attached to this card, which are incredibly powerful for this deck. So the first one, which is when you play this card from your hand, you can look at the top card of your deck and leave it there or send it to the waiting room. This, once again, ties back into the whole idea that this deck has a lot of ways to manipulate your deck, especially late game when you want to confirm top checks for your end game. This is one of the really strong cards to be able to use, as well as we have the accelerate keyword on this one as well. So if we accelerate, so at the beginning of climax phase, we put the top card of our deck into our clock. Until the end of the turn, this card gains a level on the following ability, which is when the battle opponent of this gets reversed, you can choose an avatar or net character in the waiting room and return it to your hand. So in combination with the support and this card, these effects basically become pay 1, clock yourself, salvage 2, which is really spooky. So we take that high risk of hurting ourselves, damaging ourselves, and then getting 2 cards off of it, which is really, really great. And the fact that this gets an extra level during that turn, I guess in some matchups it can be really awkward if your opponent like anti-change counters you, like against Konosuba or something like that. But I feel like if that happens, you kind of come out ahead in some way because you just made them discard 3 cards. But either way, when it gains a level, you can fight other decks like Level 5 Sunshine if that's very popular in your meta, and they get to 1 first and play down their Chicas. You can respond against their Chica board with this card, which makes it incredibly awkward and hard for them to gain any more incremental advantage after level 1, because usually Sunshine, when it gets level 1 first and they drop their bombs, they get a attack into an open board again, which is like one of the strong points of Sunshine itself. So this in a way can kind of like negate that somewhat. And then of course there's some other matchups that have level 1 reversers, and this can kind of get around it, but usually the +1 level doesn't come into effect too often, but it's a nice like added on bonus. So yeah, that's the level 1 game here. It's really powerful in the sense that, like I said, you take a high risk, high reward with the accelerate keyword trait, and then just be able to salvage 2 with the support and any of the level 1 combo stuff. And once again, no climax needed. So like if you don't draw into the climax, you don't care. If you don't want to slam a climax that turn because it's not advantageous for you to, because they're still like 6 and 20 or something weird like that, you don't have to drop the climax that turn. You can wait an extra turn or use it at level 2 or level whenever to push for extra damage when you think it's more viable than just mindlessly slamming the climax because you need to for your combo. Level 2, we play 2 of this 2-1 backup. It's just a free fresh counter. We play 2 because, well, first of all, we're playing gate in the deck, so playing a free fresh counter with gate is always good because if you triple trigger and hit a gate and one of these are in your waiting room, you can have an easy out to being unscrewed. Also, little bit extra yellow in the deck to help us find our yellow for our level 3 game, because that's when it's needed the most. And then It's a level 2 for our level 3 game when we get to Scarlet Rain level 3. It's just a solid card overall. Next, this one tech choice here. We play a little bit of green. This maybe not going to come up too often here. But this is our like early play killer. If it fights a level 3 or higher, it gains 6k power. So it's a 13k on attack, usually with no support. If you have the proper support in the back row, it's 14. And if you need extra power, this accelerate keyword in itself is pretty strong as well. So whenever you use accelerate on this card, at the beginning of your climax phase, you can pay the cost. If you do, until the end of your turn, this card gains an extra 1000 power, but it has, when the battle opponent of this becomes reversed, you may put up to the 2 cards on the top of your deck into your stock. So this is interesting in a way where if for some reason you do get screwed over early and you're forced to pay a lot of stock early, and like you need the stock to go into your level 3 game, or even to your early plays or whatever follow-up you want after this, or you're out like all your climaxes and you can just easily blind stock 2 more off the top of your deck that are clean. It's a really good ability to have. It kind of makes up for if you get hit too far, too fast ahead of your opponent and you need that extra stock. Once again, though, accelerate keyword, so is basically you're playing with fire here, and you might burn yourself if you're not too careful. Yeah. So next here is we play 2 of the 2k support. All the level 3s in front of this gain 2k power, but the reason we play 2 of it is because it actually bonds to part of our level 3 game, which is this competitive Scarlet Rain. It's a ditch bond, which means every time we play the support, it can cycle our hand a little bit and set up our level 3 game a little bit easier, as well as a ditch out for when we kind of get climax flooded. We play 2. Once again, we want more level 2s in the deck for our level 3 game plan here, as well as it's really important for us to be able to cycle into competitive Scarlet Rain level 3 because it's one of our stronger ways to finish the game. Next, we get into our level 3 game. I'm going to start with this actually early play Nico. So if the number of climaxes in your waiting room is 2 or less, this card gains maximum level in your hand. Generic early play ability, as well as when you play this card, it's a healer, which is like solid. It's not a really amazing early play level 3, but luckily it's attached to an okay climax combo, which is on gate. Since it's on gate or door or whatever, it's in itself like a reason worth playing. I don't think it's worth playing at 4 of. The most you're probably going to play down is like 1 or 2 at most. If you get 2 down, I think that's like a bit luckier in some way. But yeah, the thing is with the climax combo is when this card attacks, if you have the door/gate combo or whatever it is in your area, you can choose up to 1 character in your waiting room, return it to your hand, and until the end of the turn, this card gains an extra 1000 power. And whenever the battle opponent of this gets reversed, you can top deck that battle opponent. So this kind of pushes some extra damage in the mid game a little bit. So you're going to slam a climax, swinging in for 3, and then it's going to be 10-5 plus another 1000 is 11-5 plus the global 1k. Or if you have the support out, it's going to either be 12-5 or like 14 or something like that. Once you have all the supports out and everything set up for it. So it can contest a lot of early plays itself, as long as you don't have to run into anti-change counters or something like that. And the climax combo itself is like pretty solid, and being able to top deck certain things means like your opponent can't get cards back or can't like encore things back that they normally would be able to, or anything like that. So like, for example, if you play against Sunshine, is a common occurrence where if you kill their level 3, they can just play another Chica and summon it again. But top decking their Chica or their Yo or whatever is a really powerful way to remove cards off the board. You can as well as like use this as like the final attack in some cases to top deck a card that's going to be dead in their hand because they no longer have the early play condition or something like that, which is pretty funny. So their first draw of their deck is just garbage, and then like either forces them to clock again to get 2 better cards, or spend resources to get like fix their hand if their hand's not set up properly. Finally, this is the part of our end game. So it's actually a 2-card end game here. So this is the other climax combo. All our climax combos are on level 3 in this deck. This combo is with the Wind Trigger, this Kuryuki Hime. So it's a heal on play, but when you have the Wind Trigger on the board, when you place it, you can this card plus another card of your choice gain 1500 power, so that it's really strong on like being able to burst things now, since we're giving a big power pump, and the ability that activates up to 1 time per turn. When damage dealt by this card is canceled, you basically get the Musashi effect, but there's a big problem with this one. It does not include an extra +1 to the card revealed. So whatever level you reveal, that's all you get to burn. It's kind of like the Yo burner in a sense, but you give it to 2 characters and only if damage is canceled. So the ideal board state here usually is to play 2 Kuroyuki Hime and 1 competitive Scarlet Rain to set up for like our in-game kill turn. Usually we are hoping our opponent to be, as always, like around 3-2, 3-3 or so. And usually presenting a board like this becomes really annoying for your opponent, because it's really hard for them to live after this. So let me explain here. So since we have that effect, we have the competitive Scarlet Rain. We usually play this as a 1-of with 2 of the Kuroyuki Himes, because this gains 1000 power times the level of the card facing this, so it's usually bigger than everything else. Plus, when we play Kuroyuki Hime combo, we give it 1500 twice, because we're going to double stack it on this level 3 specifically, because whenever this card attacks, you reveal the top card of your deck. If it's Avatar or Net character, you deal X damage to your opponent, where X is equal to the card's level. So this gives you 2 opportunities to either push damage, or if they cancel or cause the cancel to go off. So like, for example, say we swing in with competitive Scarlet Ring, we reveal a level 3, they cancel on 3. Now we get 2 instances of mill the top card of a deck to burn again. And so it makes it very annoying for your opponent to like live through. In some cases you do low roll and you just reveal level 0s and stuff like that. It's like the unfortunate part of this high rolly top end. But you have some ways to mitigate that, of course. So like I said earlier, we have the Winter's Day Nico. This card, when you play, like I said, you can top check and leave it there, put it in the waiting room. You can use this card's effect to set up your Scarlet Rain for that turn. So you know the top card of your deck is like a level 3. Then you slam down the 2 Kuroyuki Himes and the Wind Trigger combo. And then you're like, at least worst case scenario, you get 4 instances of damage. But usually if you can top check something very well, like a level 3 or level 2, usually at that point you get like 6 instances of damage, and in some cases your opponent just like gets obliterated because they canceled, which is pretty funny. Yeah, and then we have Wind Trigger and Gate. Both are really strong right now, I think. So there's no anyone really running around with like any anti-salvage effects right now, which is always good. So having the salvage effect is always really strong off of a trigger. And then we have Wind Trigger to deal with things coming up, like any Albudas or anything like that, where we have to deal with walls. We can just get lucky on one of our triggers. Since we have some deck manipulation off the Winter Day Nico, we might be able to high roll ourselves into a Wind Trigger to get rid of things off the board that we know we can't deal with, and force our opponent to use more resources to put those cards back into play. Overall, I really like this deck. It's just really unfortunate that sometimes, unless you get lucky on your Swiss rounds and like dodge AOT and some other couple matches that are really tough, this deck falls apart in those matches. Sometimes it just becomes such a huge struggle that it's not that fun. But luckily you're able to kind of mitigate that damage through some of these other effects and things like that, dealing with those matchups. But if you, like I said, if you get through the Swiss rounds without having to deal with some of those matchups until the end, you can probably easily top 8 with one of these at a regional. Especially during Team League, this would be an incredibly fun Team League deck to bring. It's actually what I was considering until everything kind of shut down on us. Yeah. But other than that, guys, I hope you enjoyed the deck profile. If you end up playing this deck or testing it out, let me know how it goes. I love to hear from you guys. Other than that, we'll see you guys in the next video. Later. Before you go, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel if you do enjoy our content, as it does help us grow. And check out some of these social media links below.